Welcome back to the channel, Dragon Riders. I'm Heavy J. This is our 25th episode. I'm kind of excited about that. So, how many rounds of combat are just right? What's the sweet spot? By the end of this video, you're going to gain valuable insight that goes beyond mere game mechanics. All of this and more today on Bad Dragon Adventure. When it comes to the duration of combat encounters, is there a baseline expectation? How many rounds of combat are just right? You know, truth be told, I'm not sure there is a universal expectation. At least one that I haven't been able to find. Dungeon masters and players, I think, sometimes lean towards an answer around 3. I've heard that before. Perhaps even more for narrative combats, such as, boss battles. Similarly to various facets of the game, I tend to not fixate on how many rounds of combat should last. I believe a battle should conclude precisely when it's meant to conclude. So, my answer is this. It depends. You don't want a brief skirmish with 2 kobolds near their hideout to stretch for 3 rounds. You know, that encounter can be wrapped up by the time it takes to roll initiatives. On the flip side, you don't want the grand boss battle to fizzle out after just 3 rounds either. Climatic struggles might extend for 6 or even maybe 9 rounds. It's really all about the thematic experience. If a boss fight that people are going to talk about for years, then what's it matter, right? Have you ever had a battle that ended crazy fast? Tell me about your stories in the comments below. But first, let me give you an example of what happened in one of my games recently, and I'll kind of touch on what I'm talking about, the thematic experience here. My players are fighting this dragon who lived in a ruined castle on the side of a mountain. The entire western wall of that castle had collapsed and fallen thousands of feet onto the ground below. The dragon was just hovering there on the other side of the collapsed wall. So melee really wasn't going to be a thing because they couldn't reach that dragon. So one of the players, Ragnar, who's a dwarf paladin, got this idea. He flung a bag of dust of sneezing and choking near the dragon's head, and the rogue, who has a really colorful name of Kyle Billy Bob, shot it with an arrow. The dragon, when the dust or the bag of dust of choking and sneezing burst, the dragon had inhaled the dust, so it had to pass a con save, and it didn't. It didn't pass its con save. The effect was that the dragon inhaled all that dust and became incapacitated. And when a dragon or anything becomes incapacitated, it can't move, it has no action or anything. So it's in flight 1,000 feet above the ground. So it fell all the way, it plummeted to the ground and died. This is an example of how abruptly combat can end, and end thematically. The players were hooting and hollering and were just beside themselves with how they had pulled this whole thing off. The only thing the players had to do at this point in the game was mop up the dragon's minions, which they did rather swiftly because, well, of course, they panicked at the sight of their leader dying. Now, this encounter could have lasted 10 or more rounds easily, but with some creative thinking on the player's part, it didn't. So, rather than agonizing over the ideal number of combat rounds, I would suggest focusing more on the atmosphere, the pacing, and the rhythm of the game. Recognize when your monsters have overstayed their welcome, and don't hesitate to make a narrative call. Dungeon masters spend way too much time with aspects of the game that don't significantly impact the enjoyment and the narrative of the adventure that they have designed. After all, it was far more satisfying to the players and to kill this dragon with a bag of sneezing and choking and the heroic arrow shot from across the room, right? So I encourage out of the box thinking in my games. It's very rewarding for the players. So let go of fretting about the right number of rounds and concentrate on crafting an engaging adventure for your characters to explore in their own unique ways. Perhaps a battle concludes with a half a round, or maybe it unfolds over a leisurely 6 or 9 rounds throughout the entire gaming session. If you notice that your encounters, and this is another piece of advice I have for you guys, if you notice that your encounters are starting to drag and you see your players losing interest, you can always dial down the hit points. Now, I'm probably going to get some hate on this in the comments because some of you consider this heresy, but hear me out. It is better to dial down the hit points than to drag out the combat when everybody's looking at their phones and they've obviously tuned out. Also, you could also consider having the monsters leave the encounter. And if the players choose to chase them down, then that's okay too. I think this change of the room or the environment will also give new life to an otherwise boring encounter. So here are my final thoughts, guys. Ultimately, the question you have to ask yourself is everybody engaged in having fun? Don't concern yourself with how many rounds an encounter should be. This is not important to the game mechanics of encounter design. Not at all. If you want to have more information on how you can make your adventures better, then check out this video here. Or maybe it's going to be over here. I don't know. It's going to be somewhere here. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, and ride that fat dragon. See you guys next time.